Alright, in this video we're going to begin working on our robot. To be able to do that, we're going to have some reference images, and we're going to want some planes in order to place those reference images onto. So, I know that 10 foot by 5 by 9 is going to be a bit too big for this robot once we're at the end, once we're finished with it. So for now I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to leave this set wherever it is right now, and we're going to go to the material editor. So either this icon right here or M on the keyboard will open up the material editor. So we'll open that up, and the first thing I want to do is drop in a standard material. Now, if you've worked in Max before and you've seen the material editing, it most likely looks something like this. This is what's called now the compact material editor. So Slate is the new style of material editing. It's actually a pretty cool way to work. So we're going to start by dropping in a standard material. Then from there, we're going to drop in a bitmap. And as soon as I drop that bitmap into the view, it opens up a dialog box asking me what image I want to use as the bitmap. So we're going to start with our robotfront.jpg. So we'll open that up, and now I'm going to wire a connection from the bitmap's output to the diffuse colors input. Once that's on there, I can double click on the standard material here. And if I double click the image icon itself, I see the large version of my material. So I'm going to turn on my self-illumination to, let's make it about 60. So it'll brighten it up and not necessarily make it need to have scene lights available to it. So with that object there, I can either drag a connection from the material's output to my object, or with that object selected, I can use the assign to selection icon here. That way I have to make sure my object is selected in my viewport, but just by doing that, my material is now on that object. I can also tell that the material is on the object by these highlighted white corners here that are on the material. If I drag a new standard material in here, you'll see, let's double click that icon and zoom in a little bit. There are no corners on this object at all. So this object does not exist in my scene. The corners that show up in the materials preview there kind of clue me in as to whether or not this material exists in my scene or doesn't. So this one does, and it's on my selected object. If I were to deselect that object, you see those little corner icons turn gray. There's still corner icons there, which means the material exists in the scene. It's just not on the selected object. So if I reselect that object, those icons turn solid white. Alright, now let's close our material editor. We don't need it anymore right now, but I don't see the material on my object at this point. Well, let's try this viewport. Let's go to realistic or shaded. No, neither one of them shows that material on my object. So let's go back to that material editor. And what we need to do, with that material again selected, we need to turn on show in viewport. So what it'll do is it will show that material on my object in my viewport. So once we turn that on, the icon here changes to being part red. That red on that means that it is actually showing up in my viewport. So again, we'll close that, and now I can see it on there. So as you rotate it around, we can see our material on our object. So that's great, but I can kind of tell that the proportions of that are a bit off from where they should be. So let's go back to the material editor and take a look at that. In here, let's zoom in, let's double click on our bitmap, and then we'll hit view image. When I hit view image, it brings up the original image. Now I can see that proportionally, this is a bit different than what it appears to be here in the viewport. Here's a bit too skinny from what we want. Alright, so let's close that, and then let's close the material editor. What I need to do is I need to apply a modifier to this object called a UVW map. The UVW map is going to allow me to have a lot more control over how the material is applied to my object. So now I can kind of guesstimate. I can adjust the scale this way. I can increase the scale horizontally. But in order to do this accurately, I want to use an alignment tool called bitmap fit. Bitmap fit will allow me to select the image itself as the proportion for that bitmap. So now I see my UVW map gizmo, the orange box here, is stretched a bit too big for my modeling plane. So we can go back to the modeling plane and we'll increase the width until we can see those hands on there. Alright, so that should do it. Now, in order to be able to see this a little bit better, I'm going to hit G to turn off the grid. Now that that's done, I can see my object, I can see my material, and it works. Alright, so now here in my front view, We'll turn the grid off as well so we can see that image a little bit better. Now, if you were paying attention when I opened up that image, you would have noticed that there were actually two other images as well that go along with this robot. We have a side view and a back view that work with him as well. So I'm going to first of all select that plane, and we're going to move it back away from our center just a bit. This will give me kind of an area here in order to model the robot. I want to be able to move around in my view and look at it in perspective without having those modeling planes getting in the way. So we'll move them out of the way and kind of give ourselves a space in the middle in order to do that. So the easiest thing to do right now, I know that the bitmap on this object is the same size as the bitmaps that are for the side and back views. So in order to keep everything nice and perfectly proportioned, I'm just going to copy this plane and move it. So we'll just start by rotating it. If I hold on the Shift key while I rotate, I'll get a copy of my object. But since I'm not rotating with angle snap turned on, while I'm in the middle of the rotation process, I can hit A to toggle on the angle snap. Now that'll allow me to rotate to a perfectly 90-degree angle, and we'll make it as a copy. Then we can grab it, move it out of the way a bit. So as I look at it over here, I see in my viewport here that I have the exact same images on both objects. Well, that's not really what we want. So again, I'll hit M on the keyboard to open up my material editor. And since I have this handy dandy extra standard material right here, we're just going to drag in a new bitmap. We're going to pick our robot side, and then we're going to wire the robot side into the diffuse color. Once I do that, I'll double click on the material here. We'll increase the self-illumination. We'll set this one to 100 just to see what the difference is. I will assign it to the current object and make sure it's showing in my viewport. Alright, so we can get rid of that for now. So now I see here in my perspective view, I have a front view and a side view. If I look at this though, it appears that one of them is looking toward me and the other one is looking away. So I have options. I'm just going to start by dragging them to the other side and rotating them 180 degrees. Now if I look, he's looking forward and he's looking forward. Let's just switch this to shaded. Alright, so we have one more modeling plane to create. We're going to start by grabbing our front view here and switching to move. Alright, so now I'll hold down the Shift key and drag that forward. And again as a copy, and then we will rotate it 180 degrees so he's facing back into the scene. Now again we have the front view on there, and we want the back view. So again we'll go back to our material editor. We'll drag in a new standard material and a new bitmap. From that we will grab the robot back and wire it into the diffuse. Alright, so with that on there, now we're looking again at making our self-illumination for this object at, let's try this one at 30 and see what the difference is. Alright, so then we'll apply that to our current object and turn on show in viewport. Get that out of the way. Now, I see I have my three modeling planes, my front, my back, and my side. Alright, in the next video, we will actually begin modeling the robot himself.